Returning where we left off with Operation Ink and Thunder. Meridia is moving and it's rapidly approaching Angel's Venture. We need to defend 11 Illuminate attacks to stop it from reaching the planet. We started off well, defending 9 of the attacks. However, we suddenly started losing defenses, until an evacuation order was called on Angel's Venture. After one day, the major order ended and... Oh god. Hi, it's been a while. This has been an absolutely wild year. I left Midas behind for a Helldiver and quit 3 times. I'll talk about it later. Back to the greatest game of all time and the main point of this video. Helldivers is now 2 years old, and the last year I did a 1 year recap. So this year I'm doing a sequel to that video. Before we start the recap, let's talk about what happened in year 1. The first objective of the Galactic War was to set up the TCS on the terminated border planets, to contain them. After that was done, we turned our attention to the automatons. Since they had less planets than the Terminids, our plan was to kick them off our democratic galaxy. We were successful in this objective. For 2 days. Then the reclamation happened, taking Cyberstan and sending tons of attacks to one's free sectors. After a lot of defending, we were ready to attack Cyberstan, before it was terraformed. However, just as this operation started, the TCS failed and Meridia was a super colony. After a decent bit more defending due to Meridia being a spore generator never seen before, we were ready to destroy Meridia using dark fluid. While this was the hardest battle at the time, we did it, turning the ugly abomination to a beautiful black hole. A little while later, a spore cloud started appearing on terminated planets. This cloud, nicknamed the Gloom, started completely covering planets, making them inaccessible to us. When the cloud had covered 3 entire sectors, we started building something to help us counter it and anything Tyranny can offer. The DSS. After 2 months of tireless construction, it was ready, and it started obliterating tyrants and Helldivers alike with planetary bombardment, which by the way has been deactivated for more than a year now. A few weeks after the DSS's construction, the squid scum came back and started attacking all of our planets. During their attacks, the meridian black hole started acting up. Further analyzing proved that it wasn't a black hole, but a wormhole. And that was just about where we left off. So let's get back to year 2 with Operation Emperor's New Brood. After the 24-hour grieving period for the loss of Angel's Venture, the Gloom started spitting out spores, attacking the center of science on Fernier 3 with a new Terminid strain, the Predator strain. These sneaky bastards did not like being observed, so they started sliming out all of the scientists on the center of science. Unfortunately for the Predator strain, we started sliming them out harder and defended the center of science and then walked them down on Errata Prime. However, we weren't satisfied with what we'd done. We were going into the Gloom. Operation Gloom Eternal. Despite the Gloom naturally being a thick, super dense, impenetrable cloud, the spore conditions on 40 Prime were relatively light. This, along with the prototype communication systems and spore filters, allowed us to venture into the imprisoned planet. We were ordered to kill 1 billion Terminids on 40 Prime, extract 100 million common samples from 40 Prime, and of course liberate the planet. When boots touched the ground, the planet looked normal. I mean, the sky looks a little weird, but it could be... This Helldiver proceeded to exterminate all of the tyrants and live happily ever after. The most disgusting Terminid variant and also in a disgusting amount were on this planet. It was brutal, but fun. After a week of fighting, the Terminids were slain, the samples were analyzed and the planet was freed. Before being consumed by 2008 Galactic, I mean the Gloom. The order was won and we could return our focus to... the automatons. Operation Good Samaritan. The bot started attacking planets with 2 targets in CPU, Dumatir and Jewelhelm. Dumatir held the factories developing the gas mines, while Jewelhelm was home to the Young Citizens Andrews School for moderately feeble young adults. The automatons were aiming both at our weaponry and at our hearts, and they'll strike neither after 2 days of fighting where nothing out of the ordinary happened. No, absolutely nothing. Nothing, everything was perfectly normal.
Hey, didn't something happen with the servers that caused spikes in the...
Yeah, nothing as you can see, and we were perfectly successful in saving both the mines and the more moderately feeble young adults. See, I told you they couldn't hurt us. Operation Twin Defender was next. Two big things were happening. The squid shits were moving the meridian wormhole, trying to destroy our way of life. Morides was next on the chopping block. The thing with Morides was that it had the dark fluid research facility, a facility that was recently reopened due to unexpected leftover dark fluid being reactivated. No doubt due to the giant ball of dark fluid only a few light years away. Meanwhile, on the automaton front, the Clanks were trying to take Clarel, which contained the liberated Deep Mantle Forge complex. The automatons were trying to steal it from us. Why? I don't know, something evil though. We couldn't save both of these planets. Only one could be saved. In the end, Clarel was chosen, as we could not allow the automatons to do something evil. This came at a cost. Morides was destroyed, and with it, so was the Dark Fluid Research Facility. While this was an unfortunate setback, it was a needed reminder to return our focus to the squids and the time-warping, planet-eating wormhole. Operation Wild Hunt was the first attempt to stop the singularity, and it was a great one. We were going to build a big, beautiful wall around the black hole using warships. Hell yeah! In order to build a wall, we needed a ton of E710 and metal. So we needed to kill 10 million clankers, 15 million bugs, 6 million shredder tanks, and 8 million biotans. It failed, unfortunately, resulting in a beautiful but small wall, slowing down the wormhole less than anticipated. However, it was still progress to stopping the Squid Scourge. Operation Black Hole Sun was the start of the multi-stage plan to stop the singularity, and this one was better than a wall. A rocket of E710 made to steal the singularity's dark energy. It's just so peak. To build the rocket, which had the official name Pentahose Energy Siphon, we needed to hold the planets Ascendnar Secundus, Fenrir 3, Heath, and Ursica 11. We succeeded in this objective and planted the rocket on Ibis and started constructing it in order to send it to the black hole. Operation Tormenta de Fuego. I don't know what it says because I don't speak Spanish. However, it sounds spicy, which fits it pretty well because this was the introduction of the Incineration Corp. The bot's Predator strain. And y'all know how I feel about that. Fuck the Predator strain! That wasn't the only thing in this major order. We also need to get E710 to fuel the Pentahose Energy Siphon. To say this major order failed is an understatement. We defeated 2 out of the 8 planets, and only because the DSS is genuinely the best thing to ever happen to the Galactic War. The Terminator decided once it that much better anyway. We only gained 85% of the fuel needed for the siphon to activate. Fortunately, the next major order was another opportunity to fuel the missile into Meridia. Operation Racing Pentahose tasked us to liberate Esker and Borok in order to fuel the Pentahose Energy Siphon. This was a success, and we got to fire the rocket into the wormhole, draining the singularity of 50% of its dark energy, slowing it down significantly. This was a good step in the war against the time-warping bulldozer. However, we still needed to be sure it wouldn't destroy our home. Thankfully, we could do this in Operation Apocalypse Cancelled. The Super-Earth scientists figured out that Meridia's predicted path put it stopping just after destroying Super-Earth. However, if we were able to defend 6 planets from the Illuminate, we'd be able to stop Meridia from reaching Super-Earth prematurely. To assist in this goal, High Command granted us the Grenadier Bombardment on Illuminate planets, with the promise of putting it into production if the major order was successful, which it was, and we were granted the stratagem permits for the battlement, which is a really underrated stratagem, by the way. I really like using it. And more importantly, we were able to prevent Meridia from coming to Super-Earth, so Super-Earth's Class A plus citizens could rejoice and consider the apocalypse.
Moving on to Operation Martyr Skull. Malevolent Creek Day was just a few days away. However, ghastly automaton's programming was unable to let our citizens celebrate in peace. They wanted to take our planet, the Creek, back. We could not let this happen. We were going to call in every last Creeker to join the fight and scrap every last Clanker that even thought about stepping foot on the Creek. For the first few days of the battle, we had set up a defensive border between the Creek and the mods, using the planets Valdalon 4, Ingvar, Popel 9, and Zolf. This defense held until the Jet Brigade returned, with new factories on Aurora Bay. We tried taking Popel 9, however, just before they took the planet, the DSS stopped the clankers, riding their tracks, giving us a fighting chance to free the Creek from ever being touched by a bot again. As conditions on Popel 9 kept getting worse, we kept pushing, we kept fighting. Eventually, we did it. We had saved Popel 9 and destroyed the Jet Brigade and Incineration. This feat of pure, unadulterated democracy made the bots shit themselves and leave all our wrongfully taken planets at 0% resistance, making them ripe for the taking. We had won a great victory that day. Alright, I'm done. I'm reinforcing him. He does not pay me enough to do this shit.
Request approved. Deploying reinforcements.
Despite this great victory though, another planet was lost. Permanently. A third planet has been hit by the meridian singularity. Ivis is now a planet-sized rubble in a dead system. This was proof that the meridian singularity still posed a threat despite not being able to destroy Super Earth. Although the singularity was a problem, we had some DSS upgrades available, so we took a quick pit stop to upgrade the station. Each upgrade was associated to a planet. The exosuit support bay, which would reduce mech cooldowns of the DSS planets by 35%, will be acquired if the planet of Wezen is liberated. The expanded convocation bay, which will reduce Eagle rearm times by 15%, will be acquired if we liberated the planet Trandor. We made the right decision liberating Wezen and activating the exosuit support bay on Democracy's Beauty, making using mechs on any planet with a DSS so much more fun. Seriously, 3 mechs on a 6-minute cooldown is a dreamy experience. Operation Niflheim was another dive into the gloom, this time on Nivel 43, because the scientists on Fenrir 3 needed more of that 10x boosted E710 to produce more projections to determine what will work to stop the meridian singularity. So back to the gloom we went, and of course, we won! And the final phase to stop the meridian singularity was a go. On Pilan V, the galaxy's first repulsive gravity field generator, powered from a squid stack and fueled from E710, this machine will theoretically generate enough repulsive gravity to stop a black hole, permanently. Construction will take some time, but it will be worth it to get rid of the squid savages. However, before we could start acquiring the materials to build it, the gloom struck back, and started sending out attacks using the Predator strain in Operation Vermintide. We needed to defend 9... Jesus Christ! 9 attacks? How the fuck did we do this? Ah yeah, we used Gambit to our advantage. Good on us, honestly. Oh, and obviously we did this order if you couldn't tell. Anyway, on to more important major orders with less cool names. Seriously though, high priority alert my ass. Operation Sushi Bar was when we'd acquired the squid tech for the RGFG. We needed to defend 5 attacks from the Illuminate and killed 1,250,000 voteless, in order to study them and figure out if there's a way to stop their creation. The defense goal was easy, however we weren't on pace to kill all of the former citizens. That was until Seif had discovered a weakness and how these squids mind-controlled the voteless, making it so that when a defense campaign ends successfully, a good few voteless were repatriated. So the voteless goal for the MO would decrease by 250,000. Despite this good news, 2 not good things happened. Scientists on Fenrir 3, which was suffering constant squid assaulting, were having prolonged stress due to the squid scrapes. They needed top-of-the-line medical assistance in order to not die from panic attacks, so Helldivers stim supplies were reduced by 2. And the Xenoentomology Center on Turing, which was also suffering from Illuminate ignorance of the word consent, had a breakout at one of the containment facilities, and now the planet was under Predator strain occupation. Great job, guys. Despite all these mishaps, the major order was a success, and the RGFG was close to being completed. All we needed now was one more major order. Operation Omens Undone. This is it. This is the time we kick the Illuminates off our lawn. We're going to activate the RGFG and free our citizens from the ancient cancer of the enemy, and stop the galactic tumor from destroying our planets. The Illuminate, sensing their destruction, were trying to cause as much chaos as possible, attacking all former and present points of interest. However, despite being chaotic and costing us many planets, it had nearly nothing to do with the actual major order, which was deliberate Turing to get the E710 to fuel the RGFG and complete Illuminate operations in Div 3 and higher. Even though we lost multiple planets and we liberated Turing, we were unable to complete the squid operations in time and failed the major order. However, we did not fail the overall objective. A bold decision was made to activate the RGFG, and it successfully drained the dark energy from the Illuminate-controlled wormhole. However, it catastrophically exploded, killing all of the scientists who made it. They will be remembered as heroes, and the crater will become a memorial to the defeat of the Illuminate, who themselves will be remembered as cowards, who even in their last moments just wanted to cause chaos. Operation Damage Control was us trying to remedy the chaos caused by the squid. Specifically, getting the strategically valuable planets lost, aka Maestia, Turing, Fenrir 3, Clarel, and Akendar Secondus. Unfortunately, we failed because the Jet Brigade, Incineration Corp, and Predator Strain made guest appearances. So as we were distracted dealing with them, we were unable to liberate Clarel by the end of this major order. So we failed. Now was not the time to cry though, as we needed to exact revenge on the 3 enemy elite factions by destroying them and preventing them from taking any more of our planets, with Operation Equilibrium, where we needed to liberate more planets than were lost during the major order. After a week of fighting, it looked like we were gonna win. Unfortunately, we goofed, where instead of liberating Sulfura, we defended Nublaria 1, failing both and losing the MO. After 3 MO failures, our spirits were low. However, at least we had the celebration party on Winter's Harbor. Are you fucking serious? The squids returned with the largest offensive force the galaxy's ever seen, nicknamed the Great Host. This fleet came out of the Meridian wormhole and directly targeted Super Earth. Defense rejection so that stopping the fleet from reaching Super Earth was impossible. All we could do was stall them as long as we could, in order to damage the fleet as much as possible. Despite them damaging the DSS during the initial defenses, we were able to do 20% damage to the fleet. However, now the real fight had begun. This was the start of the battle for Super Earth. Psst, psst. Hey, if you want a more in-depth version of this fight, go check out my full video on it. It should be right here. Alright, add over. Before the squids or the Helldivers even made landfall, the Illuminate had glassed Mars, turning the burning hot planet into an even hotter planet. Vengeance for this act was owed, and would be repaid right now. The Illuminate attack on our capital had begun. Opus was the first combat ground in this battle, and the first order was issued. Operation Defenders of Our Freedom was a go. The goal was to kill 2.5 billion squids, to drastically deplete their numbers. During the order, 2 more megacities were attacked, Remembrance and Equality on Sea, and the original combat zone, Egalopolis, was destroyed by the host. Despite this adversity, the major order was won. An additional 10% of the fleet was destroyed, bringing the total fleet HP to 49% by the start of the next MO. Operation Rampart was to extract from Super Earth 20 million times to again destroy a good part of the squid fleet. Things were not going well. Another megacity had fallen under attack, Administrative Center 2, which almost immediately fell, along with Remembrance. High Command was forced to initiate Defense Protocol Sapphire, which chopped down all of the remaining rainforests and turned them into Eagle runways, lowering Eagle cooldowns by 45 seconds. Despite this, York Supreme and Port Mercy had come under attack. The smallest bit of good news came towards the end. The DSS was nearing operational status. All it needed was raw material, so we were ordered to kill 200 million automatons to aid in the repairing of the DSS. All of this combined, though, resulted in this order being a failure by 2.5%. No! The third and final operation of humanity's darkest hour was simple. Operation Do or Die had one goal: hold Super Earth at all cost. It started horribly, Port Mercy and York Supreme had fallen, and Equality on Sea was also falling behind. In short time, only one city would be left. Thankfully, the space station struck back and the DSS was reactivated and temporarily sent into overdrive with the exclusive tactical action Eagle Blockade. Immediately, we pushed the invaders on Equality on Sea to the edges of the city, forcing the squids to attack our capital, Prosperity City. Before the squids could even think of dealing any more damage to the planet, a scientist on Fort Union sent Illuminate Rule 34 to the servers of the Great Host, which exploded due to the sheer hotness of the images, dealing another 5% damage to the Illuminate fleet, and not before long, the fleet was destroyed and the Illuminate had retreated from our home. This was a monumental success. Such a victory had not occurred since the destruction of Meridian. However, this time there won't be any further consequences. However, even in our greatest moment, the squids reminded us of their chaotic roots and raised New Haven, Widow's Harbor, and PLFV, which they had acquired during the initial assault of the Great Host. The Galactic War was still in full swing. However, now we could celebrate the victory of the great struggle of our time. After 5 days of celebration, the automaton said we had rested enough and started attacking our planets, having theorized that we'd be weakened from the defense of our home. Holy shit, were they wrong though. The bots got bitch slapped by our forces, reminding them that they are the easiest and least threatening faction in the Galactic War. This major order was an easy success. What was not an easy success was the next major order. Operation Deep Cleaning revealed that the Illuminates were hiding on 4 different planets: Mog, Hydrobius, Haldus, and Bellatrix. They were hiding on these planets using dark fluid cloaking mechanisms. They needed to be shut down and destroyed. We needed to liberate the planets where the Illuminate were hiding. We failed because we didn't have enough time, just barely enough to liberate 2 planets, leaving Hydrobius and Haldus under squid occupation. However, there was no time for cleanup. The Terminids were on the move, specifically moving to our megacities. They were attacking them on more central planets, and they were putting citizens in danger. We needed to hold and defend Alta V, Volterra, Crucible, Inari, and Karamor. During the commotion on these planets, several satellites near Super Earth were disabled, most likely by the Illuminate. Now, some planets near Illuminate worlds were hidden from our eyes, the citizens on those planets most likely being subjugated to undemocratic torture by the squids. However, that's for the next major order. As for this one, we had successfully repelled the bugs off of our cities, winning the major order. Now, we had successfully repaired our satellites, and what was happening was worse than we could ever think of. On the planets of Alert 3 and Alamak 7, the cities had been transformed into disgustingly beautiful totalitarian strongholds. This could not stand. We needed to liberate the 2 planets to free the captured and mutated cities from the squids. Unfortunately, we didn't know how planet liberation with cities worked, so we failed, only liberating Alamak 7 and its cities. No rest for the wicked though, as we needed vengeance for all of the trouble our enemies put us through. Operation Debt Collector was us getting vengeance for the destruction of our cities by the Terminids and the Illuminate. We needed to kill 2.9 billion bugs and 290 million squids to get those war reparations. After collecting E710 from liberated bug worlds, we were successful in acquiring those war reparations. Don't worry, the Illuminate still owe us a lot of war reparations. 5 cities worth. We got bigger priorities though. The Jet Brigade had returned, except this time with Jetpack Hawks and Devastators. The reinforced Jet Brigade split off in 2, a first for this sub-faction, and were attacking everything they could. The goal for this order was to defend 4 attacks and destroy the resurgent Jet Brigade. After a ton of fun, seriously, the Jet Brigade is easily the best sub-faction in the game, we defended against the onslaught of attacks by the automatons, saving our citizens from more unneeded violence. The next major order was Pillar of a Dawn. The Freedom to Serve Act had just been passed. A crossover with Xbox and Helldivers had been announced, and a lot more recruits were coming. A lot of Xbox players were coming. So we needed a brand new training center to train all of the new recruits. The chosen planet for the training facility was the Gamma Paradise. and this major order was to acquire the materials to build the training facility. To get those resources, we needed to liberate Gar, Horan, and Gartria, as well as extract 50 million common samples. That was a success, and now the facility was complete. The new recruits were still a decent bit away. However, any new Helldiver or any old Helldiver that wants to redo his training will now be training on Zagama Paradise. However, the new recruits couldn't fight our Super Earth battered, so we needed to rebuild our great planet. Starting off with the second city that was destroyed, Remembrance. We needed to hold Errata Prime, Veld, Sylph, Valmox, and New Stockholm, and we needed to complete 5 million operations on Div 3 and above. After an assist from the factory hub on Akandar 2nd, lowering the operations needed by 50%, we completed the major order, rebuilding Remembrance and allowing us to name the planet. After a couple days of voting, we chose the beautiful, patriotic, and downright democratic name of Gun. Absolute democracy. However, for democracy to remain absolute, we needed to defend our cities, and the automatons joined in on the dismantling of them, as they had started attacking our cities on multiple fronts. Fronts specifically related to the DSS, aka Claurel, Tars, and Galavar. Why? I don't know, they hate freedom, I guess. We needed to hold these planets versus these electronic idiots and their new war striders. We failed. The oily clamps of the automatons managed to add Claurel to the list of war crimes. We were unable to free the dismantled forts in time, and thus the automatons, their abominations, killed more citizens and stole more of our land. All of the stealing and massacres our enemies had done had gone into our civilians' heads. They needed to feel safe again, so High Command started construction on a new type of city, a maximum security city. 3 of them: New Aspiration City on Emeria, New Yearning City on Fort Sanctuary, and the flagship maximum security city, New Hope City on Fort Union. Before the first brick could be placed on any of these cities though, we needed to call our citizens nightmares, which was the main thing Operation Calling Nightmares was about. We needed to kill the enemies that scared our citizens the most, specifically 20 million Shriekers, 12.5 million Impalers, 7.5 million Flesh Mobs, 6.25 million Factory Striders, and 7.5 million Leviathans. Now this was a tough one. We killed Flesh Mobs and Shriekers easily, the rest not so much, until Claurel became infested with weaker Factory Striders, giving us enough numbers to kill them. We also got an easy opportunity to kill more Imps. High Command authorized a small-scale expedition into the Gloom on Fori Prime, so we could kill spor-ber warriors using the Stalwart. Conveniently, Fori Prime also had an Impaler Surge. This allowed us to complete the minor order and the Impaler part of the major order. The last step was the Leviathan part of the major order, which we did ourselves. Kinda. The Helldivers started a Captain Ahab level campaign against them using the anti-tank emplacement. The images and videos of the killing of Leviathans had a bigger effect on our citizens than expected, decreasing the objective by 50%, and because of that, we had won. One of the most difficult major orders given to us. Along the lines of Operation Enduring Bulwark and Operation Adamant Resolve was complete and successful. Freedom had won the day. Back to the major orders, this time involving the Gloom. Remember our small-scale expedition on Fori Prime? Yeah, the Gloom took it personally. You think we'd liberate a bug world hive planet? What would a terminated home planet be called? Anyway, back to the Gloom. They were sending attacks using the spor-ber strain, a first for this strain. That was bad. However, it was discovered that we could create new Alcubia Drive spore shielding to enable a new era of Gloom expeditions. In order to enable these revolutions, we need to collect 30 million rare samples in the Jin G sectors and hold Turing and Akendar Secondus. We achieved this, reminding the spor-ber strain that they needed to be kept home, and that they're only a reskin of some basic terminates. Still better than the Predator strain though. Back to the maximum security cities, specifically New Aspiration City on Emeria. They were still scared of the automatons coming and attacking them. To quell their fears, we needed to kill 2.5 million troopers with the orbital rail cannon strike. What? That's gotta be a mistake. Holy coughing baby versus nuclear bomb. What is this? And we also needed to hold Dumatir, Julhelm, Dolph, and Becknum 3. You'd think we'd fail, right? Yeah, I thought so too, until we got 2 free rail cannon strikes, so 3 if you brought one yourself, with a 30-second cooldown. Yeah, that was awesome. I mean, that sound alone, it was orgasmic. Of course, due to all these beautiful gifts from High Command, we did the major order, and had a ton of fun while doing so. Seriously, this was really fun and extremely silly. Makes me hope they'd buff the actual stratagem. Throughout all of this time, the new recruits were closer to joining the fleet, so before they became heroes of the Federation, they should see who they were fighting. So, in Operation Lost World, we constructed Tyranny Park 2. Bigger, better, and safer than the first one on Okamar 4. This one was built on Bor Rock, and had a variety of terminids to be viewed and, for a premium price, hunted. To fill the enclosure, we needed to liberate Borak, obviously, collect 40 million common samples and 50 million rare samples from Tyranid, what is this, 40k? Sorry, Terminid worlds, and eliminate 1.5 million Bile Titans, 2 million Impalers, and 5 million normal Chargers. Before we talk about the results of this major order, we had 2 minor major orders to talk about. First, this was the liberation of Crimsica, in order to get the E710 for the new fleet of Helldivers, which was successful, and the extermination of 100 million spor-ber strain terminids and 500 million predator strain terminids. In order to expand Tyranny Park 2 with a forbidding gloom expansion. This was successful, and now Tyranny Park 2 is officially bigger and more educational than Tyranny Park 1. Back to the major order, everything was completed except for the charges goal, mainly because it required normal chargers, which are pretty rare on high difficulties. However, a last-minute unanimous decision was made to diversify the charge section of the park, so the charge goal was considered met, and thus we won, securing Tyranny Park 2 and assuring the edutainment of our future citizens. However, we needed them, and Operation Ultrakill tried to prevent us from having them. Multiple planets have come under high-scale invasion from Terminids. The reason for these invasions is a population explosion within the gloom. This population explosion could only be called if we killed 6 billion Terminids! This was going to be a long and violent conflict. Many planets were lost, including the factory hub, which still hasn't been reclaimed. However, this wouldn't be the only front under the attack, as the automatons also started an offensive of their own. Similarly to the Terminids, we needed to kill 1.5 million clanks to halt their offensive. However, unlike the Terminids, the automatons would be assisted by the Jet Brigade and multiple versions of the Incineration Corps. However, and you can see where this is going, these two wouldn't be the only 2 fronts under attack, as the squids began an offensive as well. Clearly, they were more opportunistic than prepared for this offensive, as we only needed to kill 1 billion of them to halt their offensive. All 3 of our great enemies had started attacking us simultaneously. We were losing planet after planet. However, hope was not lost, as our new fleet was coming in 3 days. We needed to stall our enemies from reaching our great cities for a little bit longer. And that we did. The new fleet had now arrived and started kicking ass from their sheer numbers. Nearly 400,000 Helldivers were active, even more than the Helldivers came to Super Earth defense. They first targeted the Illuminate scumbags, as they couldn't let Seychelles Beach, which housed New Alexandria, fall. I mean, they did let it fall, but they stopped the squids in their tracks before they could reach New Yearning City. Next on the chopping block was the automatons. While they reached New Aspiration City using the Jet Brigade and Incineration Corps due to their cowardly deactivation of the Eagle Storm on the DSS, which just proved that the automatons feel fear, they were unable to do any damage to the city that couldn't be repaired, as they were stopped in their tracks. The last ones that needed liberation were the Terminids, which we actually did a pretty good job of holding off, until Tyranny Park 2 exploded, and thus, due to unforeseeable events, the Terminids made their way to New Hope City, where they failed to take it because they are weak and they had to deal with the entire might of the Helldiver Corps. and during the end of this major order, we managed to slay all 6 billion Terminids, winning Operation Ultrakill. Celebrations were in order, the 3 maximum security cities were safe, the new Helldivers had just proved their might as Super's greatest heroes, and the enemies of democracy were proven to be scum and pathetic even when working together. However, after the celebrations, High Command turned their attention to the catalyst of these invasions, the gloom, and it determined that a defensive posture was no longer sufficient, and that the gloom needed to be destroyed. The first step in the destruction of the gloom was to find the source of it. One source was found in the Myron sector. Now was the time to act. All super destroyers were augmented with 2 layers of gloom shielding. We were going to set up a forward operating base to examine the gloom source. Where the operating base would be placed would be determined by the Helldivers. There were 3 choices: Nibble 43, Hellmeyer, and 40 Prime. The Helldivers chose Hellmeyer for the memes, a decision that they'd regret later on. During the last few hours of Hellmeyer's liberation, a new strain of bug was encountered, the Rupture strain. Easily the best bug subfaction, by the way, even in this somewhat unbalanced state that was unreleased. However, even in the imbalanced state it was no challenge for the Helldivers, and Hellmeyer was liberated. Immediately, the forward base, now dubbed Outpost 1, scanned Oshaune. It was immediately clear that the once green, raining, and beautiful world had been terraformed, turning into one massive hive, and it is producing more spores than even the most liberal of scientists' estimations. Oshaune has been dubbed a hive world. Oh, so that's what bug planets would be called. Now we descend onto this hive world. Not to liberate it. No, we can't do that now. We need to examine the planet. The first part of the examination was to extract common and rare samples from Oshaune. How many? 350 million common and 200 million rares! While also holding Hellmeyer. The Helldivers, eager to acquire the samples, jumped onto Oshaune and immediately regretted the decision. This was an even worse campaign than Meridian. Mission failure rates had reached an all-time low. The Rupture strain was brutalizing any and all Helldivers attempting to collect samples and complete objectives, and worst of all, it was only the beginning. Before things could get worse, we made a groundbreaking discovery involving the admittedly low amount of samples extracted from the gloom. The E710 on the hive planets was more dense than the regular E710, to the point where it was its own separate element, called E711. And the far more interesting part of this E711 is that it can be turned into synthesized dark fluid. Gone are the days of the Illuminate being the only ones able to control this super weapon. By the liberation of this hive world, the power of dark fluid will be in our hands. Permanently. However, that required the liberation of this hive world. Which, yeah, is not going to be easy, because the reinforcements just arrived. First were the Draken Roaches. Massive flying bile titans, spitting fire with immortal wings? Huh. These things were more numerous than chargers and far more deadly. Any Helldiver caught in their fire molted faster than if they were to be standing in a fire tornado. These dragons first appeared on Hellmeyer, attacking the planet and trying to stop us from reaching the hive world. Thankfully, the attack failed, and we got to trying to extract samples from Oshaune, when the second line of reinforcements arrived. A Titan-class Terminid, thought extinct from the First Galactic War, the Hive Lord. All of these things, plus added negative effects due to the gloom becoming thicker and thicker, resulting in defeat for the Helldiver Corps. Defeated and battered, the Helldivers left the gloom to plan the next major order. Unfortunately, the Terminids planned the next major order for us. The Gloom was pissed at the fact that we even thought of attacking their hive worlds. In retaliation, they sent out attacks to planets around the Gloom. We needed to defend 7 of those attacks. The Gloom was not messing around, especially with Hellmeyer, attacking it with hive lords. Thankfully though, neither were we, as we had managed to defend all of the attacks that came from the Gloom, proving to the Terminids that it was only a matter of time before the hive world was freed. In order to free the hive world though, we needed Outpost Alpha to be even stronger. Thankfully, the automatons were able to lend us a hand in that department, as decrypted automaton communications had revealed underground mining operations on Mentoria. These mining operations, if liberated, could be used to fortify Outpost Alpha on Hellmire. The Helldivers needed to liberate Mentoria and hold Hellmire. Are you seeing the pattern? After a couple days of fighting and one defense of Hellmire, the Rupture Strain disappeared and got replaced by the fucking Predator Strain on the Hive world. We liberated Mentoria, winning the Major Order and fortifying Outpost Alpha, drastically decreasing the negative effects of the gloom on the Hive world. An upgraded Outpost Alpha wasn't the only thing we needed to call the Raging Hive. We also needed to allow the DSS to enter the gloom. However, since the DSS is a little bigger than a Super Destroyer, it would take a little while to apply the anti-gloom polymer coating. However, with the right atmospheric conditions, it could be done much safer. Thankfully, there was one planet that had the right atmospheric conditions, Carlia, which at the time was under Illuminate control. The Helldivers were ordered to liberate Carlia and the planets around the system, as well as hold Hellmire. Again. A couple days of fighting later, plus one more defense of Hellmire, and the Helldivers had liberated all the planets around Carlia, as well as Carlia itself, completing the Major Order and augmenting the DSS with the ability to enter the gloom and the DSS autoclave, which drained about 50 cubic kilometers of the gloom per minute. While this wasn't that important in the destruction of the entire cloud, it was very good at lowering the resistance on gloom-affected planets. Back to the automaton front, this time to acquire more lore. Intel from Mentoria had revealed that sensitive information involving Vessel 00 and Nucleus were on Menkent and Aesir Pass respectively. Liberating a planet would give us info about the automatons. Which one would be liberated was left to the Helldivers. We liberated Menkent, getting info about Vessel 00. Turns out the automatons are religious, and this Vessel 00 is their god. Essentially, Vessel 00 is a ship that left Cyberstan during 2180. What it carried and where it went is unknown. However, it was the last trip the ship made. This raised many questions about the automatons which are yet to be answered, simply due to having bigger fish to fry. However, in due time, we will find out the automaton secrets. Next up were the squids, with their ancient secrets uncovered too. Ancient squid ruins from before the First Galactic War had started acting up. Obviously, this wasn't good, as similar structures were also on Illuminate-owned planets, and who knows what the squid could be doing to activate them again. We were ordered to liberate Alert 3, Heteron Secundus, and Zia Regosia, as well as hold Hellmire. The Helldivers, after defending Hellmire again, liberated the 3 squid-owned planets and keeping their monuments monitored and safe for the time being. Back to the automaton front, however, with a different objective this time. Liberty Day is approaching and we needed fireworks to prepare the 24-hour firework display on Super Earth. The dirty automatons were not helping us in this apartment, as they had stolen a large stockpile of fireworks and kept them on 2 planets, Marfark and Zosma. We needed to liberate those planets and to get our rightfully owned fireworks back in order to be able to properly celebrate Liberty Day. The Helldivers realized the stakes have never been higher and rushed to liberate Zosma and Marfark, successfully collecting all the fireworks and saving Liberty Day. We got one more major order though, this one finally being something important. And finally, the Thief, after weeks of preparation, were on the cusp of beginning the liberation of Oshaune. All they needed now was to fully secure Outpost Alpha, liberating all the planets around it, aka Errata Prime and Estanu, as well as holding Hellmire. After defending Hellmire twice and liberating Estanu and Errata Prime, we were ready to attack Oshaune. Not right now though, as we had Liberty Day to celebrate. And our efforts had paid off. A beautiful fireworks display was above Super Earth, to the point where we could visit Super Earth and see it from orbit. It was beautiful, and so was the Major Order. We needed to kill things with a Constitution. 40 million enemies of freedom, to be exact. And while this does feel like a big goal, the Helldivers, fueled by their liberated spirits, did the Major Order, earning a beautiful cape to always remember this Liberty Day. After celebrating the greatest day in the galaxy, the time had come. We were to descend upon Oshaune again, not to scout or to extract, but to kill, to free, to liberate. We needed to liberate the Hive world. We were going to rip and tear until it was done. We were not going to relent until it was purged. We were going to free the galaxy of the gloom's putrid abominations. Right here, right now. We started by deploying the DSS to activate the autoclave to weaken Terminator resistance, and then deploy en masse to kill them all. This was going swimmingly, at least for Hive world standards, until the Rupture Strain returned and started attacking our planets. Part of the fleet was moved to try to defend the planets attacked by the Strain. This failed, allowing the Terminants to take our planets and slow our assault on the Hive world. However, things were speeding up again, as the DSS planetary heavy ordnance distribution was activated, speeding up the liberation of the planet. However, due to the tectonic disturbances, the Hive Lords emerged to the surface of Oshaune. However, not all was bad, as liberation efforts continued, especially when the Predator Strain retreated in favor of the Rupture Strain. That was until Hive Lord populations ballooned and started attacking Thief Troopers, massively decreasing liberation efforts. We needed to kill 50,000 Hive Lords to pop the balloon. We did that in 18 hours, proving our resolve and determination to liberate this hellhole. Just as Terminator resistance fell to normal levels because of the killing of the Hive Lords, the DSS Gloom shielding started failing. It needed to be sent to Corellia to be cleaned up and repaired. However, there was the option to keep it on Oshaune, risking damages but keeping it in the fight. The Helldivers chose the right option and sent the DSS to Corellia. The station was offline for 12 hours because it was being repaired. During the 12 hours it was offline, liberation efforts slowed, but liberation rates didn't decrease, which was all that was needed to push through once the station returned to Oshaune's orbit. After the Terminants trying to push us off their homes by increasing the number of impalers on the planet. This, however, wasn't enough, and one day before the MO ended, finally, we had done it. Oshaune had been free from the Terminate Scourge. Immediately, we set up infrastructure to extract the E-711 from the planet, and we also started butchering the Hive Lord corpses of the planet in order to find weaknesses that the Titan-class abomination may have. Another bit of good news is that, due to our more destructive Helldivers, we managed to destroy 99% of the spore lungs on the planet, destroying a huge part of the gloom. This operation ended in perfect victory. The great expedition had been considered successful, and we embarked on a new operation. Operation Free Space. Before we'd be able to move forward with Operation Free Space, we remembered that we needed to rebuild our home. Super Earth still had 4 destroyed megacities, and we needed to repair them. The next one to be built would be York Supreme. In order to rebuild the city that ended the Great York Conundrum, we needed to hold 2 planets from the squids, Andar and Azeroth Prime. After a minor order to liberate Barabos, to acquire trees in order to reforest the last remaining raven forests on Super Earth that were turned into Eagle Runways, we got completed both the minor and major order, and got to vote on the name of the city, which we chose to be New York Supreme. During what would be a great moment for our citizens, the Kofsas had found a disturbing trend among some planets. The planets Galavar, Alta V, and Dulivia were rife of dissident activity. The evidence was undeniable. Low enlistment rates, high sick day usage, report of antisocial behavior, and, worst of all, crazy haircuts. We needed to act immediately. First of all, we needed to expand the Kofsas. For that, we need to hold Maestri, of course, and collect 15 million samples from squids and 22 million samples from automatons. During this order, we needed to prove to our citizens that they didn't need to be scared. To prove this, we needed to kill 5 million voteless using the orbital laser.
But weren't they former citizens?
Orbital incoming.
This was successful, and so was the major order. However, in order to make sure dissident rates went down on dissident planets, High Command deployed siege battalions to the planet, leaving frontline planets relatively undefended. That gave the enemies of freedom the terrible idea to attack our undefended planets while we were fighting ourselves. We needed to defend 8 attacks from any faction and hold Turning, which housed the Xenoentomology Center. We completed one of those objectives. We held Turing. However, we failed to defend 8 attacks, failing the major order. This MO being a failure was blamed on the dissidents across the galaxy. This meant war! The expanded Kafkas found dissident activity along the lines of prolonged and avoided eye contact with authority figures, use of slang, and long breaks on every planet. This needed to be stopped. We needed to liberate more planets than lost during this major order, and more importantly, liberate Afoya Bay, to set up the construction of a megacity-sized prison named the Center for the Containment of Dissidents. This major order was successful on both of those objectives. The CSOD, the CSOD could house 15 million dissidents and re-educate them. Construction of the CSOD would require the relocation of the materials from the reconstruction of New York Supreme to it. This was a difficult sacrifice that just proved the war on dissidents couldn't end until every citizen was under Super Earth's control. Democratically, of course. However, we had a bigger problem than dissidents. Automatons were found on previously unoccupied magma planets, harvesting their resources for their own selfish needs. We needed to stop them, because every ore they took was a child's future lost. Currently, we found 3 magma planets under automaton control: Fury, K, and Mox. We needed to liberate these planets to find out why the automatons wanted these planets. During the first Helldiver deployment to these planets, we immediately found out how industrial these planets had gotten under automaton control. Factories and bioprocessors everywhere, along with batteries to power the socialist toasters. We also found platinum, an exotic resource, and what was theorized to be the main reason the automatons were on these planets in the first place. We needed to liberate it from them, both in confiscate asset missions and rapid acquisition. We failed, and we did liberate one of these planets, Fury. During the liberation, we discovered that platinum was not the only reason the automatons were on these planets. They also had a primordial soup that was made of our innocent, hardworking, and attractive citizens. This was enough proof of the automatons' crimes, and we needed to stop them with all our democratic might. The next major order was us destroying the automatons' crimes and making our own industrial undertaking. We needed to liberate all the magma planets again. However, we also needed to hold Afoya Bay in order to build Pandora's base. This would be related to Operation Free Space. However, the reason was undisclosed for now. After a bit of fighting, we had completed the major order, successfully building Pandora Base and implementing Operation Free Space, which by now was revealed what it was actually about. A DSS upgrade named the Star of Peace. That would revolutionize freedom as we know it, and give us a leg up on the enemies of democracy. The reason why it was on Afoya Bay was because the dissidents would become legally mandated volunteers in order to build the Star of Peace to earn back their citizenship. This excited revelation would be halted in favor of celebration. The Festival of Reckoning is usually a 3D event to remember those who were lost and to exact vengeance on those who killed them. However, due to the invasion of Super Earth, we needed to exact more vengeance than usual. That's why High Command authorized the elongation of the festival from 3 days to 14, as well as trying out experimental stratagems. The EMS 120mm barrage, the Flame Gatling barrage, and the Smoke Walking barrage. The true objective of the order was to simply liberate more planets than are lost in the major order. We also got mini orders to kill enemies on the planets Heath, Marfark, and New Stockholm, planets that also had the new experimental stratagem. We had 3 of these mini orders, each one related to an experimental stratagem. We succeeded in 2 out of 3 of these mini orders and succeeded in the entire major order. This was a great Festival of Reckoning. We also got a cape at the end for it, and gotta say, I'm a sucker for that red and gold cape. However, we have more important matters to attend to. Operation Free Space and the Star of Peace were proceeding on schedule. It was, as said before, a DSS upgrade, with the primary weapon being an ionized beam of dark fluid, which was synthesized for the first time by humans thanks to the E711 provided from the hive worlds. Examination of the E711 from Oshaune was nearly complete. However, we didn't have enough to safely fire the Star of Peace. Thankfully, we found another hive world, Omicron. We needed to extract from Omicron 8.5 million times in order to acquire enough E711 to safely fire the Star of Peace. We failed, unfortunately only acquiring 97.5% of the E711 required to fire the station. We needed to continue constructing the Star of Peace. However, this loss was still devastating, and would come back to bite us. The next order was to hold the Magma planets. It was discovered that firing the DSS/Star of Peace macro laser generated way too much heat to be safely fired, without catastrophic destruction. And it was also discovered through interrogation of captured hard drives that the automatons, in order to survive the Magma planets, used iridium-infused superalloy heat sinks. Fortunately for us, holding the Magma planets would give us enough time to repurpose those heat sinks and add them to the DSS to protect it from self-destructing when firing its greatest weapon. After little resistance from the cowardly toasters and a minor order to liberate Vog Soyath, we held the planets, got the heat sinks, and augmented the DSS. Now this is where the fun begins. Despite failures, the DSS is ready to test fire the Star of Peace. The Helldivers were going to choose a target, both through managed democracy and through liberation. The major order was to hold Nivelle 43, Afoya Bay, and Lazath. During the liberation of Lazath, the DSS went offline on Super orbit, and the voting phase began. 3 planets were available: Penta, an automaton planet; Zagon Prime, a hive world; and Velmox, a Illuminate planet. Whichever planet was voted on would be turned into a black hole. And as the time drew near to see the democratic destruction of an entire planet, we liberated the Zath and Nivelle 43, and then voting ended. The DSS flew out of Super orbit, and then
witness the power of this fully armed and democratic space station.
Penta is gone, turned into a stable, conventional, and safe black hole, where it was unable to obstruct any woman, man, and asteroid in their way. That pain, that suffering that was caused from seeing a planet, our planet, being destroyed, now it could be redirected to those who deserve it. Penta, which was a site of communism and tyranny, is now a reminder of what happens to those who disobey democracy. Unfortunately, there was a victim in this victory. The DSS was damaged during the firing of the Star of Peace and was stranded in the vicinity of the black hole it had created. Eventually, it was moved to Afoya Bay for safety. This would turn out to be anything but safe, though, as the Illuminate were planning an attack on the Seasod and Pandora base and the DSS. Most disturbingly, though, the plans for the DSS leaked. At first, it was suspected that the dissidents on the station downloaded them. However, the Ministry of Unity needed an investigation to be sure of who did it and why. We needed to liberate Velmox and Miriam to clear a path for the DSS and hold Afoya Bay to make sure the DSS is safe in the first place. During this fighting, a automaton data center on Klasa was discovered. While chief hacking specialists, codenamed Ironsights and Dripku, were trying to hack the data from the center, they were unable to due to the orbital defenses of Klasa. The Helldivers were ordered to do 750,000 of the new commando/elite operations on Klasa in order to assist the hackers in the extraction of the data. That was successful, and so was the major order. Now we needed to figure out who had acquired the plans for the Star of Peace. The main suspect was the automaton data center on Klasa. However, to be sure, we were also ordered to liberate Yed Prior, Adhara, and Mog. This order unfortunately failed, because the Illuminate put up an unexpected amount of resistance, which left us unable to liberate Mog. However, High Command's suspicion was true. The automatons were the ones who had stolen the Star of Peace. Why? To make their own Star of Tyranny, and convert the symbol of peace that is the DSS into a weapon of total annihilation. We could not let this happen. The culprits were identified, and they will be thwarted and destroyed, as a defensive stance would no longer be sufficient, and Cyberstan must be destroyed.